We live in a time that promotes extremism in many different ways. This is a problem for democracy, since democracy needs truth and extremism is built on lies. Democracy is a system, an ongoing dialogue. It is built on the ability to take reason, facts, and knowledge into decision-making. Extremism is also a problem for human rights, because extremism lacks the capacity to take care of other beings. It tends to use individuals as means and violence to get what they want for their interest. It is dangerous. It fuels conflict within societies and between countries, and is a real threat to peaceful development. Extremism never asks contrafactual questions, but that is what we have to do. Our time is in great need of reality checks, exercised of all of us, wherever we are. Gender equality is my field, and also a field with a history of great success. It has given me an extensive experience of reality checks and a profound understanding of why equal power, equal rights and conditions for women and men carry the essence of democracy and human rights. Gender equality is a normative that requires change. It will never happen in status quo. If you ask for change, you must be able to explain why are we going to do something and what are we going to do. Being a young woman in the 70s, as I was, when the new policy on gender equality launched a range of reforms to take care of all the problems that we knew of, that convinced me that changes can take place if they are understood to be reasonable and justified. The reforms in the 70s, they were based on facts. Sex disaggregated statistics, research, investigations, and with the involvement of many different organizations. In a few years, separate taxation, parental leave, free abortion, public childcare, Gender Equality Act and the Gender Equality Ombudsman were established. This transformed everyday life of women and men. In less than 15 years, hundreds of thousands of women entered the labor market, got money of their own, didn't have to choose between taking care of the family or pursuing their education or professional life. Childcare was built. And neither did men have to choose between family or their professional lives. So these few years is one of the fastest and most profound transformations in Swedish society ever. And childbirth did not drop, men did not become unemployed, both men and women were healthy, etc. This transformation was phrased the women-friendly state. The old agreement between the state and a patriarchal family model had been transferred to a gender-equal welfare state. And I have lived my life in that model with family, children and all, and I am grateful to working with it. The effects of the reforms on the 70s, they were thoroughly investigated. I, for instance, just one example, I worked with representation in state agencies, the parental leave, social contract studies. I worked with unions on class and sex issues. I assessed sports organizations to find out about representation in decision-making and the distribution of resources to women and men. I made a study on an organization ransacking 60 years of annual reports to get information on representation, resources, and the norms in their activities. I called the study "Nothing Fascinates as Much as Facts," because when analyzing the facts from a sex-gender system, power system, the patterns came clear. This led to the 3R method: representation, resources, realia, which I developed to answer one question, the power question: who gets what on what conditions? The 3R method is not normative, it is factual. It gives us information on what we have, not what to do. What to do stems from our goals. Anyway, all in all these analyses led me to a new strategic direction into the main building, advocating for equality between women and men, being part of the solution of problems in all policy fields. When training the government on this new strategy, the Prime Minister asked me, "What do you think we should do?" And I think that was the best question ever, and I have carried it with me ever since. In 2005, I was honored when given the opportunity to lead a government committee on gender equality policy with a mission to formulate new national goals, later decided by the parliament and still the current ones. Already then, authoritarian ideas were spread, and also a terminology with floating and relativist messages. Anything could be combined with anything in an infinite number of ways. So I decided to let the committee become an act of resistance, a deliberate pushback on the authoritarian backlash and a rejection of relativism becoming more and more extreme. The overarching goal of this committee and the ones we have is based on the principle of democracy and human rights. Women and men are to have the same power to shape society and their own lives. And power, needs to be stressed perhaps, is not a personal quality, it is about relations. The sub-goals highlights the same rights and opportunities for women and men in, for instance, to be active citizens and to shape the conditions for decision-making in society. Or another goal, to have the same opportunities and conditions as regards paid work, which give economic independence throughout life. That was the first time that the economic situation for retired women and men entered gender equality policy. And just a last example of the goals, the inconvenient one. Men's violence against women must stop. Human rights for women and men without distinction is our moral basis. It ensures dignity of the individual and guarantee freedom from oppression. This has a very special meaning for the relation between women and men, as that relation is very specific and basic. It is about the complex rebirth of humanity, which shapes entire societies by laws, regulation, reforms, distribution of money, and also religions, traditions, and culture. The Convention on the Rights of Women, CEDAW, deals as the only UN convention with the human reproduction. No one else. The convention is based on the special role of women in the human procreation as the starting point for oppression of women, of controlling women, or controlling childbirth, controlling children. Therefore, the rights of women in the convention are guaranteed based on women's biological sex, which men don't have. It's not based on gender and not on any identity. And the convention's role is to eliminate subordination of women, and that is gender. Today we experience an authoritarian slide, which we know very well. We have discussed this, we are familiar with it. But also an extremist, relativist, both liberal and left, slide. Not yet openly discussed. None of them have an interest in gender equality or women's rights. None of them have economic prosperity for society or individuals in their goals. They serve other interests. We now witness both a shrinking of space and rights in society for women, as well as a changing and damaging use of extremist terminology. When we don't reference women anymore, when sex identity is said to be equivalent or to replace sex in law, in policy, in social practice, we undermine the Convention on the Rights of Women. We undermine democracy. We undermine truth. We might as well accept the earth to be flat as a pancake, because some people feel it is, as well as a globe. We must show that words carry realities. When women are eradicated or reduced to commodities to be controlled in families or owned and bought in pornography, in prostitution, in the surrogacy industry, I say these are lines not to be crossed. It must be clear that we oppose all forms of discrimination against women and girls that result from patriarchal interests or by replacing sex with sex identity or gender identity. The risk is watering down of years and years of work, and that is a red line. We defend the obvious, that inherent to the principle of equality between women and men is the concept that all human beings, regardless of sex, are free to develop their personal abilities, to pursue their professional careers, and make choices without the limitations set by stereotypes or rigid gender roles or prejudices. The red line is when this means depriving others of their rights. And that is the counterfactual question. That is the reality check inherent in the very Human Rights Convention. It is facts, not diamonds, as Marilyn Monroe sang, that is a girl's best friend. But it is also the best friend of all men who don't want to live in a society where the oppression of women is assumed to be in their interest or high on their personal agenda. We are in Norrbotten, a truly transformative place and time. Some say this is Klondike. I don't approve of that, because Klondike only meant grabbing and exploitation. And we know a lot about exploitation and grabbing here in Norrbotten. But this is Norrbotten 2021. This is where we search for sustainable development and not exploitation. This is creaternity, a new model on how to live on Earth, doing reality checks on production, on business models, on the environment, on human situations and cultures, using democracy and counteracting damaging and extremist interests in search of a world-standing exhibition. This is where a human agreement between women and men, built on dignity and truth, should be our legacy for next generations to come. This is our human capacity, our vision of how it could be, our efforts to get there, and our ability to imagine how wonderful it will be. Thank you.